Hey everyone, welcome to my channel where I help you become a better artist. Today's lesson is all about perspective and how you can instantly fix that really troubling perspective problem that seems to plague all of us artists when we first start out. I know the frustrations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little trick that you can do without having to use any ruler whatsoever. And this is for those of you that are sketching freehand in a sketchbook and you're wondering, why is my perspective always skewed? Why can I not get this right? And I'm going to tell you why. So let me first of all explain that back in the day, I used to be an industrial designer. And one of the strengths of industrial design training is the emphasis on perspective. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to draw a vehicle for you. And it's probably a far cry from the creatures I draw, but hey, I was in transportation design. I love drawing cars, and you'd be surprised of just how fun drawing a car is, because there's organics involved and hard surface. But look at this paper, okay? There's the edge of the sketchbook, there's the sides over here, and there's the bottom right here. Now, your first inclination is, well, I got to put a horizon line and I got to put a vanishing point on this paper. When you're in training for perspective and foundation studies, yes, that is absolutely correct. The problem with most portfolios is that artists will force the vanishing point in our own line of sight. Let me explain. Everybody look around your surroundings right now. Look at your desk. Look at all the objects that are sitting there, your lamp, your pencil holder, your tablet, scanner, pencil sharpener, everything. Every single thing that you have is going into perspective. There is a vanishing point somewhere off in the distance. The thing is, based on humans' peripheral vision, most of the time that vanishing point does not exist in our own window of sight, our own line of sight. Now, if you're walking down a street and it's like a gridded neighborhood and then you see sidewalks that are straight going into the distance, yes, you can look at the horizon line and go, well, beyond those trees in that neighborhood, 50 miles from here, there is going to be a vanishing point. The thing is, you don't need to tell everybody else that that thing exists. All you need to do is make your object on your paper believable enough and showing that all of the lines are correctly going into perspective. All right. So what I did here was I drew the center line of my vehicle. All right. Now the next thing I'm going to do is vital and making sure that I have believable perspective. My vanishing point is not going to be on the page. It's going to be off in the distance, way out here somewhere, because I'm not forcing the perspective onto the page. Otherwise, you have what's called forced perspective. Everybody knows what the gridded city looks like in environment design portfolios, don't you? Yes. What makes the successful environments? Having you as a gamer and as a viewer of that environment seem like you're actually living within the space. Okay, that's what you need to do for everything that you put in perspective. So I'm going to make it seem like you're standing close to this car and not force the perspective. I'm not going to put a bounding box on it. Bounding boxes are great to learn from, but once you start learning the tricks of the trade, you don't need it anymore. Now, I'm not going to be drawing with my wrist because I need straight lines. So I'm going to be drawing, you can't see my arm off of the camera, but it's going, or it's pivoting on my shoulder. So I'm using big swooping motions, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock my pencil and I'm going to draw a line like this. Okay, very light. So here's where everybody screws up. Every single perspective line that you line up needs to converge and not diverge. So what does that mean? It means that all of the lines are moving in the direction to finally meet at that vanishing point somewhere in the distance. So now that we do not have it on the page, we are going to make a believable perspective because all of my lines will eventually converge to a point. Diverging is, just to check your own lines, lay your pencil down on the first line that you do. Oh, it's probably rolling here. Sorry. So there it is. Now, what you want to do is put your other pencil down, and if it's going like this, it's opening in space. That's incorrect. You want to make sure that it diverges, even if it's slight. We as humans know if something's incorrect. Have you ever wondered why, even if you're not a good figure drawer at all, when you look at somebody else's drawing of a person, it's incorrect? It's the same thing, because we see perspective and it's built into our subconscious. So we know that if I were to take even a third pencil, okay, this is how you check your lines. You take your third pencil, all right, and let's say something's up here closer to what you would call the vanishing, or the horizon line. There you go. That's correct. Okay, it's diverging, or converging. I'm sorry, it's converging. Okay, now this probably needs to be tweaked a little bit, right about there, so that eventually all of these lines are going to that point out in the distance. All right, so let's get to it. Okay, so the next part. This is axle number one. This is the front axle of the car. We are going to be viewing the vehicle from almost like a top-down view. Picture, being at Sebring or being at, Formula One or whatever, and you're up in the stands, but you're on like the first row, so you're kind of looking down at the car, but not really. Or it could be a very low car. Here's what I need you guys to do. First, before you draw that line, make sure that you're not slouching. That's the second thing that people do that skews the perspective, and you probably don't even realize you're doing it. You need to sit up and you need to look directly, see this pencil coming into view? Look directly down onto the surface of the paper. What happens is when you start drawing and you're slouching, and a lot of times when we draw, we kind of tilt our head just to see things at different angles. You can't do that with perspective when you're lining things up. You can do that later when adding details and shading or whatever, but not perspective, because we need to see this in a front plane view so that we know things are converging, because it may look like it's converging if you tilt your head, but it definitely not converging when you see it on the screen and you realize, oh my gosh, all my perspective is screwed up. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep my pencil loose, okay? So I'm not gripping it down here at the front. I'm actually going to move it back. All right, now I'm not standing, but I'm sitting up straight. This is going to take a couple passes, but remember, these foundation perspective lines that you're using, it's going to be your lifeline into a believable sketch. So what I'm doing now is I'm looking directly over it, all right, and I'm making sure that this line is eventually converging. Now look how thick this line is. It's not the best thing in the world. However, it's a good enough indication of where that is. So let's test it out. All right, so let's put pencil number one right there. Pencil number two right here. Aha, it's working. Okay, it's converging in the distance over there. I don't have to prove anything to anybody. I don't have to show you that there's a perspective or there's a vanishing point on the sheet, because then the perspective lines will be opening up so violently that nobody views the real world like that. That's what makes product design and concept art and props and all of that stuff believable, is when you draw it as if you're viewing it from real world. All right, now the second thing that I typically like doing when I draw cars is I like to put my ellipses in there. And I'm going to give you a little second lesson here, how to draw ellipses in perspective. Let me tell you something. You got to draw hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of these to know that you are screwing up or getting it right. Now, the trick to an ellipse is it's just a circle in perspective. That's all it is. I'm going to teach you how to open it up too. This front axle right here, this is going to be my selling point. Okay, remember when I was talking in my last video about when you draw creatures, you want to put the emphasis on the area that you're trying to sell the audience. Okay, so this is what I'm going to do here, and I'm going to put this ellipse down. Now, I'm going to show you the trick on how to do this. You're probably wondering, wait a minute. How do you know what angle to tilt that ellipse? And how much to open it? All right, so the trick on knowing how to tilt it is when you look at the ellipse and you look at the perspective line, cutting it completely in half, you want this and you want this to be a perfect 90-degree angle. That's how you know you're tilting it correctly. All right, so now what you can do is you can test it out by drawing it, that nice little line. You'll probably eventually erase this. And then go down to the center, or not the center, but the lowest center part of the bottom of the ellipse. Okay, and the same thing up here. So where that line ends, that's the top of the tire. It doesn't round off higher anymore. So then you just very loosely, see I'm putting the pinky here, and then I'm just slowly but surely going over this. Remember, this is going to be a rough drawing. It's not going to be super detailed. Now, where do we go from here? Okay, we are going to use the converging trick again. I'm holding this pencil way back here this time. I'm going to go to the center axle, and I'm going to draw another perspective line going in the distance. This isn't a random perspective line. Remember, there's another vanishing point, folks. It's on the other side. It's not equidistant either. It depends on how your object is tilted. So, to check to make sure that you are correct, take your pencil, lay it right here in that center line that you first started with. Take your second pencil, and then you're going to move it. And look at that. Those are converging also. So that means that somewhere up here in the distance, you're going to want to converge that one also. But the only thing is, when you converge that top one, because that's going to be the center of the other wheels, those are on the other side of the vehicle. You don't have x-ray vision, so you're not going to be able to see it in real life. But you know that your perspective is correct. All right? So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the ellipse that I put here isn't necessarily started yet. Okay, I like putting little dots where the very middle of that axle would be. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my ellipse, and I'm going to go to the top part of it, the outermost part up here, and I'm going to draw another perspective line. But guess what? I'm looking over my drawing, and I'm making sure that this also follows the convergence. So then when you line the pencils up, you have this, and you have this all converging nicely somewhere off in the distance. I don't need to prove to you that there's a vanishing point. You know there's one. Why? Because these are converging correctly. Take the bottom of the wheel. What part of the wheel is actually touching the cement? Down here. So then you do another perspective line, but guess what? You have to make sure that that converges with the other ones. Here's where it can get a little tricky. See that center line cutting in between this axle and that axle? So you're going to lay the pencil down, and then you're going to take your pencil again, and you're going to do that last line that you drew. Are those converging? Yes, they are. Now you can start stacking them up. Oh, look at that. That one's converging. That one's converging. So now you're successfully drawing perspective without using a single tool. I don't know how that happened. Hold on. I think that was on my... You guys are going to see me use an eraser. How dare I? Okay. There we go. Okay, so now the fun part begins. This axle is opened more. Okay, so, well, not open more. It's tilted more to the side, so you're going to see less of the wheel. You know how high the wheel goes because you already drew the construction lines. So now I like to draw the center part that makes it 90 degrees first, just so I know where the lowest and the highest point of the ellipse is going to be, and then I round it off from there. There we go. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, wait a minute, it's closed. It's not as wide open as this one. Yes, that's right. Because if you ever look at a car in real life, you know that when you start to back away from the side of the wheels, they're going to become flatter because of perspective. Okay, that's all you got to worry about. Now, here's the other fun part. This and this are cylinders. Let me explain. The bottom, I'm holding my hand loose. There's the bottom of the cylinder. There's the top of the cylinder. Making sure that you're looking at it downwards and sitting up straight. Okay, I'm going to tilt this a little bit. Making sure you're sitting up. There we go. Now, look what's happening. All of these have to converge also. You don't get off scot-free without converging those. Now we know how high and low that second set of tires are. All right. Here's the center line for the entire car. I could probably actually move that down a little bit. I'll keep the same perspective. I'll just move it down because I don't want this to be a super wide car. Otherwise, it's like a Dodge Viper on steroids. I mean, those things are already wide. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make sure that this ellipse, I'm going to honor that, and I'm going to put it over here. Okay. Put the ellipse right about here. I'm going to make sure to tilt it correctly so that this is 90 degrees. Okay, I'm going to tilt it. Probably make it a little darker for you. Okay, now the fun part, and that ellipse is actually going to open up more because when the ellipses get closer to you, they get flatter down here. All right, so what do we do next? Take the center axle, and we're going to move that back into the distance. But hey, guess what? Because we were successful in making all of these lines converge, guess what? This axle and that line hit right there. So now you know where the center of that wheel is. Then you honor the 90-degree angle rule. Guess what? There we go. There's your ellipse. Probably hold my pencil just a little closer there. Keep it loose. Now this wheel won't be seen, okay, because nobody has x-ray vision. You don't have to worry about it. So now the fun part begins. This is what I like doing. Probably going to make it a little sports car. Why not? Down here, it's called the rocker panel. Okay, that nice little lip on the side of cars. Some cars have a more pronounced rocker panel than others. Okay, so I just like to envision where that may be. The next thing is probably, you could do one of two things. One, you could draw the center line of a shape that you think the car will be. All right, so what I mean by that is when we look at this center line right here, okay, we can draw a line straight up, all right? And when we draw that center line straight up, anytime that you have an object in perspective, doesn't matter what you're drawing, a gun, a creature, or whatever, all vertical lines stay straight no matter what. Okay, so I'm just going to lightly put those in. So that's going to be the center of my car, as if I'm taking a like a meat cleaver and I'm just chopping it in half. Okay, so now what I can do, and like down here where the bumper, you know, where the bumper could be, somewhere down there. Okay, so let's roll up a pretty cool looking car here. So this is going to be the center line. Okay, that can probably be straightened out just a little bit more. Ballpark area. There we go. Okay, so that's the center line. Next thing that I want to do is I want to figure out what I want to do with that bumper. Okay, so let's be really simple just for the sake of teaching and not having anything too complicated. Like I'm not drawing a McLaren, although that would be fun, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to round off the bumper. Okay, I'm going to tilt this a little bit, and I'm just going to put a semi-sharp angle right there, and I'm just going to stop right there. Now, if your converging lines are successful, you have a lot of points of interest now, like frames of references that you could follow. So for example, down there where the bumper is, before it gets into the wheel well, it actually stops on the exact line of the bottom of the cylinder. All I got to do is just jump to the other side of the car and know that if I were to wrap that bumper around in perspective, it's going to stop on that line. So I'm going to do that. And there it is. Now, some of these lines will probably be tweaked, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty easy. Now, the fenders, I want to come over the car. So I'm going to jump up here, and I'm actually just going to put a really cool rounded shape on top of the fender. Again, we're keeping things simple, everybody. So it's on top of the fender. So now we know that the wheel is underneath. The reason why that cylinder was so important to draw was because it gave the indication of where that wheel is on the other side, so I know how high to make the fender. I'm not guessing anything. This is based on the measurements that I'm making. Now, the second thing that I want to do is I want to figure out what's going on with the windshield. All right, so now I have this arc coming down here. So obviously this is the roof of the car up here. Let's just make it a two-seater just for the heck of it. Down here where it all of a sudden gets flat, that's probably where I want the windshield to be. So I'm just going to round off a simple piece like this. All right. Now I'm going to make sure that this is in perspective too. If what's called the A-pillar begins right there. Okay, and I'm going to explain what the A-pillar is in a second. There's the point at where like the windshield wipers, the vents, and the hood and everything stops, and then the A-pillar starts. We go into perspective. Remember, you have a lot of frames of reference now based on all these lines that you did correctly. They're all converging over there. So we know to stop it right here. I'm not going too far up with the windshield. And I'm going to flatten it out, and I'm going to follow the roof back. And I'm just going to give some nice little wispy lines here to make it seem like the car is moving. I'm going to show you the part where everybody screws up car design when you first learn how to do it. And that is how much to show in that upper back corner. Now, a lot of times what happens is the artist will think that we need to see more than what the human eye actually does see in real life when we're viewing it. Okay, so for example, if I just follow this back wheel right here, there's the, like the wheel well inside here, there's the side of the tire right there, wraps around. Let's just make something really smooth and futuristic, okay? So let's just bend, like this car has no trunk, okay? Maybe like a little opening. So there's the top of the back of the car. All right, here's the center line just to give myself a peace of mind. Okay, there's the center. Now, here's the fender. Here's how high it is. If you're going to do successfully another perspective line, you want to make sure that that converges by looking at this line directly under it that you know is correct already. So you're going to wrap it right there, very lightly, like this. Just kind of slide your pencil across. Don't grip it too hard. Now, I know that if I go to the other side of the car, the fender only comes up that high. And then, if you follow this roundness to roughly the same degree, it doesn't have to be exact. Remember, there are no measuring tools that you're using other than your eyes. That you know that you want to round it relatively at the same angle. That's how much of the hip actually shows on the other side versus melting the car and bending it upwards to try to show us something that's not there. We know it's there. Okay, so I'm actually going to darken the top of the car because it's closer to us. Okay. Now, the other thing is if you want to check it, this is the beauty of having construction lines and drawing through your sketch. Right here it's what you call the belt line. So, think about why, like the location of our own belts when we wear pants. It's in the midsection. It's in the middle of our body. Well, the belt line to the middle of a car is right there where the door is, like the window and the door. So the belt line goes back. How do I know where the belt line is? Well, guess what? All of my perspective lines are going into the distance correctly. So these follow, and I'm making sure you can double check as you draw. That converges, that converges, that does, that does. So if you were to lay 6 pencils down, they're all going to get smaller eventually as it goes off into the distance. All right, so let me indicate just a little bit more where that hip is, and then we're good. I'm not going to put a spoiler on it, even though it's, you know, it's very tempting. Second thing to do, well, I'm sorry, not second thing to do. The next thing to do is figure out, okay, so the whole cab, okay, let's just round the window off. This is where you can have some creative freedom because, you know, it's a concept car, so it doesn't really have to be perfect. Let's roll the roof up right here and stop it and roll it right there. All right, so we already have that perspective line established for us. I'm just going to draw it on the other side, round that off. Now, what the heck is the A-pillar? All right, so the A-pillar is right here by the window. I'm just going to lightly sketch it in. All right, all cars have an A-pillar. The trick on what direction to point the A-pillar as you're going down, it usually, not all the time, but most of the time, will be in direct line with the center of that wheel. So then when you know, especially if you do a side view of a car. So let's say you have the ground, let's say you have the wheels, like this, there's the bottom, say you're doing a sports car. Okay, there's the hubcap, 45-degree angle, there's the windshield. And there's the A-pillar right there. There we go. That's how you know that it's relatively at the same, I don't even know what I drew there. It's kind of like 1950s something. What is that thing? I don't know. But anyway, that's how you roughly know. Now, what's the B-pillar? Well, think about it. It's the next one in line. You're just reading off the alphabet. So the B-pillar is the conclusion of your front door. Okay? What's the C-pillar? Well, a lot of cars, a lot of two-seaters don't actually have a C-pillar. Or you can have a Hummer, which is a C and a D pillar, or you can have more than that if you have a limo, or you're driving a Maybach or something. So let's just say, for the sake of drawing something kind of neat, there's a C pillar in the back and then a tiny little opening. Okay, so hey, you know what? Maybe this is a 2+2. Okay, it's a coupe, but if you want to sit behind it, there are some seats available. It's kind of like when I owned the FRS. It was a 2+2. Even though it was not built to do that. All right, so now we have that. Yeah, it's looking kind of decent now. What I like doing for the mirror, just do like a cool shape and hang it off the side there. Okay, like this. However, you can't just guess where it goes over here. Guess what you got to do? You have to make sure that your perspective is correct. What am I going to do? I'm going to just tilt this slightly, sit over my sketch, and I'm going to make sure that that is also converging, the top of it and the bottom of it. You have to be mindful about all of your neighboring lines. Okay, so at this point, if you guys are drawing along with me, it should look like this, regardless of what you're drawing. If you're doing an awesome, I don't know, prop for a game or something, or a movie, same thing. Okay, the top of the mirror on the other side is going to be right there. The bottom of that mirror is going to be on that line. So now you know how much is going to show on that. Okay, so now you know how much to show. And then you could just do some fun stuff. Give some like accent lines here, maybe a vent. And I'm not going to get into too much detail about that at all. Just indications like where the tire is, maybe some shadow. There's some of the rocker panel coming out. You can have some fun with it. There's the wheel well. And I'm hoping that by the end of this video that you will at least have a better understanding of making something believable without having the vanishing point directly on there, okay? And I'm just going to do some sunken in wheels here. We're going like old school concept art here. Very, very simple hubcap, okay? There's the wheel. Okay, and then you can indicate where the shadow is for the car. Just have fun with it, guys. You know, do your light. Okay, well, guess where the light goes on the other side? You have the top of the light, you have the bottom of the light. That has a perspective line too. You want to make sure that that's correct. There we go. Same thing with, you know, the radiator, everything out front. I like to darken everything that's in front of us. There you go. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in today. You know, if you guys have more perspective issues, comment below. I love to read about that stuff because it gives me ideas for future videos. Also, there's a pinned comment. I'm going to give a shout out to all of my awesome channel members. If you guys want to join the channel membership, you can go ahead and join that. There's a lot of cool perks coming up. Thanks for tuning in, folks, and I will see you later.